first 4 minutes. You will hear the audience clapping, and as the curtain rises, we see Estragon in the middle of the stage trying, but without success, to pull off his shoe. Vladimir enters and greets him.
رح ارجع بلش من جديد.
In 1983, the CSP section presented a dramatized play reading of Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett in West Hall on the American University at Beirut. This is a video recording of that play reading, but unfortunately the first few moments of the picture were lost, although we do have the soundtrack. So we will begin with the soundtrack, even though the picture remains this one at present for the first 4 minutes. You will hear the audience clapping, and as the curtain rises, we see Estragon in the middle of the stage trying, but without success, to pull off his shoe. Vladimir enters and greets him.
Nothing to be done.
I'm beginning to come round to that opinion. All my life I tried to put it from me, saying, Vladimir, be reasonable. You haven't yet tried everything. And I resumed the struggle. So, there you are again.
Am I?
I'm glad to see you back. I thought you were gone forever.
Me too.
We'll have to celebrate this. But how? Get up till I embrace you.
Not now, not now.
May one inquire where His Highness spent the night?
In a ditch.
A ditch? Where?
Over there.
And they didn't beat you?
Beat me? Well, certainly they beat me.
The same lot as usual?
The same? I don't know.
When I think of it. All these years. But for me, where would you be? You'd be nothing more than a little heap of bones at present minute, no doubt about it.
And what of it?
It's too much for one man. Bones at the present minute, no doubt of it.
And what of it?
It's too much for one man. On the other hand, what's the good of losing heart now? That's what I say. We should have thought of it years ago, in the 90s.
Stop blathering and help me off with this boot.
Hand in hand, from the top of the Eiffel Tower, among the first. We were presentable in those days. Now it's too late. They wouldn't even let us up. What are you doing?
I'm taking off my boot. Did that never happen to you?
Boots must be taken off every day. I'm tired of telling you that. Why don't you listen to me?
Help me.
It hurts?
Hurts? He wants to know if it hurts.
No one ever suffers but you.
Oh.
I'd like to hear what you say if you had what I have.
It hurts?
Hurts? He wants to know if it hurts.
Well, you might button it all the same.
True. Never neglect little things of life.
Well, what do you expect? You always wait till the last minute.
Okay. Those first minutes were there also just to have everybody come in and sit down and relax. Waiting for Godot has been considered as one of the best ways of introducing you to absurdity as an understanding of what the meaning of life is. Is the meaning of life, is there a clear purpose? Are we going somewhere clearly? Can you really define the ends of life, what you're working for, what you're moving to? Can you expect things to move the way you think they would be moving, especially if you're living in a scientific and technological world? Absurdity came as a kind of in a sense, another wake-up call to the civilization that it was a part of. And that's what you've been seeing really into for so far. Darwin waking you up to understanding the world of science in a way that's very different from the way you understand the world from a religious or a literary or some other perspective. So it was a wake-up call for people who thought they knew everything about science and they could get it all from Aristotle and the Bible. All right? Darwinian evolution challenges people to look into that again. Okay? Marx, of course, challenges you about your views of society and your views of history. And that basically things can be understood scientifically, and he claims that Marxism is the only scientific socialism, and he gives you what he gave you in whatever you took of Marx about how we can understand the world, how we can bring basically heaven on earth, etc., by changing the systems and leading to a world where everybody is treated fully equally and treats everybody else fully equally, and primarily through the socioeconomic base of society. The way society is functioning at the material level will help you to improve. If the more you can improve that, the more you will get a better, basically, human condition for the whole of humanity. Nietzsche is a wake-up call to everybody who's belonging to any system and trying to warn us about systems, obviously necessary. We can't each just develop our own system, but that the worst thing is to see yourself living in a slave way. And so master morality and slave morality was one way of understanding what Nietzsche was trying to do, the kind of provocative and sort of wake-up call for his society, that they all thought they knew what good and evil was, that morality was the morality they all tended to accept, and and also the whole slogans of the modern period of the perfectibility of man, automatic perfectibility of man, and all that sort of stuff. He challenged his society to revalue value, to look and see, well, what is true value? And true value for him is giving life. And basically, this is one certainly very important standard you should be looking for, criterion, for whatever it is you're going to finally call truth. And therefore, you need to revalue your own views. You need to rethink about the views you have. And to revalue means to bring back the life out of them, that somehow the ism world, the comfortable world, the herd world, the slave type of world that was evolving, it was your worst enemy. When we come into now, Thomas Mann, of course, puts much of the Freud, of course, challenged humans to look more deeply into what isn't calculable, and just that you can just see it all simply and through consciousness, and especially the way consciousness had come to be understood through Descartes and things like this. And he challenged us all to look more deeply into, what really is governing us in every way. Not just, we like to think of ourselves as just rational and all that, but that in fact there are much deeper forces working on us, and we must take account of them if we want to be healthy in any way. Beckett now comes kind of at the end of this string of people, representing basically the failure of the gods. That's an item on the sheet there. The failure of the gods. And the gods here mean anything that has become very influential, sort of looking to it for some sort of real significance when you're seeking meaning in life, right? That you have to take a look at all the gods. And so here we're back to Nietzsche's idols, because Nietzsche's idols are the sort of thing that is functioning here. So all the gods in the sort of mid-20th century have failed, the failure of the gods to give you meaning, because humans look to something serious to get meaning. So whatever it is you're looking for to get meaning about your life can become a kind of a god directing your life. And the more you become aware of these things, the less you are enslaved to them, and therefore the more you can hammer away at any idol that comes up in such a way, the freer you can then be to really make up your own mind, to really look at things yourself. So at this point in the 20th century in Europe, absurdity became one way of putting together human life. Life is primarily absurd. What does that mean? Well, we'll try to unpack it in this lecture. But first of all, just a few biographical things about Beckett. Beckett was born in 1906 to middle-class Protestant parents near very, 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 very Catholic Dublin, Ireland. He was a bright student of modern languages at Trinity College in Dublin. He taught upon graduation at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris between 1928 and 1930, returning to Dublin to hold the position of assistant lecturer in French at Trinity College. 2 years later, he left an academic career to travel around Germany and France until in 1937 he decided to settle down permanently in Paris. During World War II, he joined the Muqawami, the resistance against the German and the Nazi invasion. He joined them, the French resistance, working near Avignon as an agricultural laborer. After the war, he settled back in Paris and decided to write in the French language. He said this would make him think more about, because he writes in his own native language. Words can just sort of have their own impetus, whereas here he had to think about things more clearly. So he wrote what he wrote generally in the French language, including Waiting for Godot, initially, therefore, created in French, later to be translated by himself into his mother tongue, which you are reading. In 1959, Trinity University bestowed upon him an honorary doctorate in letters. 1969, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, quotes, for writing, which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man. So the context is a feeling of destitution. Modern man feels lost, having lost all their certainties, all their gods, all the things that let them think that they really knew what was going on, what life was all about. The destitution of modern man. World War I, the most educated people in the world, devastating each other. World War II, even more so. In between, the breakdown of capitalism and the breakdown of the economic order in 1929, the Great Depression. All this seemed to belie any claim that this modern civilization, with all its modern science and modern technology, was going anywhere serious in terms of improving the human condition or the lot of humanity. And that's why Nietzsche had already attacked all the isms that were promising you, to benefit mankind and take mankind forward. And Nietzsche tried to show you how each one of these, when they became an ism, whichever they were, feminism, communism, Kantianism, Christianism, Platonism, all of them promising you something, but not giving you anything, just all sort of vague promises. So he has written important novels, poems, short stories, in addition to plays and mimes for stage and radio. He died in 1991. For more detailed biographical notes, you get plenty of that on the web. I'm not going to waste your time by giving you any more, but he certainly lived an interesting life. He was a recluse. He was very sort of withdrawn from everything. But interestingly enough, he considered himself as giving a view that was hopeful. When you read the play and when you see many analyses that are going on, the one I compare him most to, of course, is Nietzsche himself. That basically, when you read Nietzsche, you could get into thinking this is just, negative and it's negating everything and blowing everything up. But as Nietzsche himself said, I hope if you still remember that from the lecture and from the sheets you got, basically, he saw himself as the opposite of a spirit of negation. He thought by attacking things, he would revive whatever was left there of life. By attacking something, he said, you never help a cause more than by attacking it, by persecuting it. And what he meant, I think, is that basically people in that ism will wake up from being a herd and a slave in that ism and flip over to becoming more of a master and bring back whatever was life in that ism before it became an ism. And so reviving the life in it, restoring it. So rather than negating, but really saving something by focusing on what you should look for in any ism or anything that's presented to you, you should test it by its fruit. And its fruit basically is, does it give life or does it not give life? I think, my own understanding of Beckett is close to that. But now he's doing this in the form of a play. He's presenting all the gods of the day in this symbolic and allegorical form in a play. And the conclusion from them is that if this is what they represent, then there's no reason to believe there's any meaning to life. Life is absurd, and the meaning of the word absurd comes from the French sourd, deaf. The universe is deaf to you as a human being. Nobody's listening to you. Humans don't really listen to one another. Aslan, they just listen to themselves and somebody else. They want to get through listening to somebody so they can speak about themselves. Humans don't really listen to one another, and that there's nothing beyond that that you can really corroborate that is really concerned for you as a human being. So your appeal for meaning, your search for meaning, there's nothing corresponding to it in the world you live in. There's all the gods that claim to give you Marxism, socialism, feminism, Christianism, Islam, whatever whatever ism you want to talk about, or whatever doctrine, or doctrinal thing you want to talk about. Every ism is not really giving you much help, because, in fact, you can conclude from this that really it's the same kind of situation that Nietzsche was addressing. Everybody's talking about life, about the new man, about bringing heaven on earth, about the perfectibility of man, of a loving God or a merciful God, or whatever they're talking about. They're just talking about it and making use of it to fill their pockets with money, to fill their own life with glory and honor and respect. Nobody's really presenting life that's in each of these things, because I think he really believed there was life in each of these isms, but that he was looking at a society where he could see the whole intellectual and spiritual life, as he experienced it, showed no signs of true life. So, coming to the fly sheet, I'm going to go through that. As what you're watching here is, I'm sure, not distracting you as much as from your mobiles, but if you can get away from your mobiles, you can sort of at least be watching it. That's David Korani there, if anybody know who that is. This is playing Estragon, and a British gentleman playing Vladimir. And going through the text, therefore, if you had the text with you, that would have been the best way. You would have been sort of look at the text and listen to this. But now, instead, I'm giving you a lecture. And so basically, I'm just going to go right through the fly sheet with you. That's the best way not to lose you. And then the situation generally, however, there are two major currents, intellectual, poetic, artistic, literary currents at this time. One is in the artistic world between realism and things that came to be packed together as anti-realism. Now, what does this mean? It means that towards the end of the 19th century, much of what were plays, what was anything, all had happy endings. King Lear was being changed into having a happy ending. There were things like, people wanted to entertain you through art and all of this. And so basically, there was the first reaction against all of this was kind of from the scientific community that preferred us to look at society and have art help us to look at society in terms of the real things that are influencing human beings, all right? The political situation, the economic situation, the psychological situation, etc. So realism meant, and the whole philosophy behind it was primarily one of scientific determinism, the environment. The environment affects you. You want to know who you are? Understand the environment better. You know what society is? Look at the environment. And so all art should in one way or other be presenting this. In Stalin's Russia, scientific realism was the only form of art that was acceptable. And so all art should in one way or another be helping people to understand the basic message of Marxism. And bourgeois corruption was what anything else was kind of looked at as simply helping the capitalistic bourgeois system to go on in one way or another. Okay, very quickly, a reaction to this reaction came in. And the basic notion there was that, we have documentaries, we have other forms of helping us to understand what's going on in the environmental level. Art has a special genius, art has a special gift, and that is to appeal to our creative powers so that we can see beyond just what we see in concrete data, so we can see insights, so we can see the meaning of human life. And human life is subjective, not just objective. Kierkegaard, the man who came before Nietzsche, had actually wanted to provoke his Hegelian society with the thing of saying, truth is not objectivity, truth is subjectivity. Now, what did these people mean? They meant primarily, don't neglect that there's the human behind the facts and the objective truth that you're getting. There's a human behind them. That's why Nietzsche says, every philosophy is an autobiography. Take a look at the human is giving you their philosophy and seeing before you can really fully understand it. So they thought art should be appealing to our the creative powers, to see things through art. So therefore I've given you that on the other sheet you have the Picasso. If you flip to the other side of it, you have this famous work by Picasso, Guernica. Have any of you met it before anywhere in your lives? Okay, one person has, okay. Well, this, it'd be very, very good for you to take a look at Guernica properly. You can get much better color versions on the web for yourselves now, etc. Guernica was a subjective presentation of truth for Picasso. Picasso was presenting what he was seeing as truth at this time, the civil war in Spain, all right, and people were destroying each other. Right? So if you take a look at that picture, you might see in it that this is Guernica's appeal to you to bring you into what he was seeing, because if you're not an artist, you may just stick to a more surface view of things. The artist brings you into the abyss, into the deeper aspect of human sight, into insight. And so you now can experience more the tragedy of humanity generally, and the way wonderful things are then spoiled, and how in aiming for a good end, the means that are being used can destroy everything. As Nehru told us in 1960 here at the AUB, he gave a whole lecture on the ends and the means, and he said you can never get an end by using the opposite means. The means you use will condition and form and shape the end. So basically, this is one of Picasso's ways of expressing how humanity was tearing itself apart through this civil war. And if you take a look at it, you get into it, and you get more into art, and you'll see the symbolism in art. Waiting for Godot is a very symbolic play. It's not about Mr. Godot or Mr. Estragon or Mr. Mabarif Chou. It's about you and me. So in this kind of symbolic work, one way of understanding it, one way of appreciating it, is to try to see what is the symbolism in each of the characters, what's the symbolism in the overall play, the way it's being presented on a bare stage with just a tree, and there's not, it's like a moonscape. There's nothing concrete about it. The environment, you can't tell, well, this is, this is Berlin, or this is Beirut, or this is something. No, it's just like, it's an abstract geography. It's sort of in the middle of nowhere, all right? And so this is the first introduction to kind of how he's bringing you into his understanding of our humanity. Once we start to think about it, right? So all this literature, of course, is first and foremost addressed to fellow thinkers, fellow artists, etc. And that's one level that you need to keep in mind. So when Nietzsche says he's attacking the victorious, he means the ones that have power, all right? And so he didn't like to attack things that were not. Today, everybody's attacking the weak and supporting the victorious, as far as I can see. But basically, this play starts off like so it's a play. That's the point I'm now on your fly sheet. Okay, it's a play, but this play has no specific setting. Each of the characters is highly a symbolic message about something in us as a human being. There's no real plot. There's no action in the sense of going forward somewhere. There's just activity. We always give ourselves something, ADD, to give us the impression we exist. So everything you do in life is just sort of activity. Action means you're getting somewhere. It's going to lead you to something. So it's a play, and so that is a drama, and a play simply is a text and audience. A text being presented by actors, and directed by someone, and with an audience to interact. That's all a play needs to be a play. So it's a play, but it's not a play that you're used to in any way, that people were used to at that point. It had no action, no plot, no understanding of the characters, what they specifically mean. The opposite of realism and naturalism, in where each thing should be very specific. Each character, you should identify them. Yeah, this is somebody I know. This is like Fulan. This is like this person. This is like that person. And the more detail you present in it, the more they're really like something you can see. This was the heart of naturalism and realism in art and in plays and all of this. This was a reaction against it, anti-realism. That the truth you're going to find there, you can get it in books, you can get it in documentaries, you can get it in scientific studies. You don't want to waste, you don't want to further emaciate the human capacity to see beyond just the concrete, to activate their creative powers, to do that by making art just following that sort of thing. Art should be a presentation of a vision of what's going on in life. So Picasso is the presentation of a subjective vision. But subjective does not mean the opposite of objective in science. Subjective means having a human behind it. Having a human who's convinced he's doing something serious, not just trying to make more money. All right? And this is why Nietzsche tells you, beware of philosophies. They're the autobiography of the philosopher. So you can't just take it at the surface. You have to see, the human behind it. Truth is subjectivity. All right? If this truth doesn't speak to me as an individual subject, then what worth is it? It might be a wonderful argument, it might be a wonderful book, it might be letting somebody make lots of money, etc. But is it truth that I can take as a human truth, as an existential truth, as a personal truth that I can really take seriously without making it another God? So this process, the existential process of knowledge is never coming to a point where this is it. This is how I see it now. This is the way it's being seen. This is the way I'm trying to understand it better. But it's never the final word unless you think you're God. And there were lots of gods in the modern period and still are. So this is a very, this is his way now. This is our friend Beckett's way of giving you subjectivity through a play. And subjectivity means here the best way Beckett can employ his creative artistic powers to present you with something that if you experience it properly and more than once and done well as a play, because plays are like that, they're not just like Picasso's thing, you will more and more get into the human experience that led him to present this work. And the experience basically is the one of absurdity. That, we've tried everything, everybody's offering us the solutions, new Middle East, new world order, there's always something hicky just giving us a heaven on earth, automatic progress and perfectibility of man, science, technology. All these slogans are simply gods, and your subjectivity primarily has to be taking a very critical look at the latest gods, not just the ones that Nietzsche was hammering away at, but he was trying to give you an approach so that you could employ that approach to the latest gods, the victorious powers today that are ruling the intellectual and spiritual and media world. So, summary. So therefore, he says it's kind of like he says, I'm just making. What does all this mean? He says, Habibi, I'm trying to draw you into deciding what it all means. I don't want to just be another person giving you something that you can sort of, memorize or give, or, get some conclusions about. I'm trying to wake you up. So you do what I think I'm doing. That was the message of Socrates. I think that was the message of Nietzsche. I think this was the message of Beckett at this point, and why he insisted that he was not a nihilist, that he was simply giving hope to humanity. I think in the same way that Nietzsche was telling us his way is the only way to go forward in evolution, to not have evolution be the survival of the unfittest, the mediocre, the powerful. So basically then, he says, it's kind of like he's giving you a chance to you take a look at it all and see what meaning do you find in it. And of course, he's addressing this primarily to people who think they know about what life is all about. They know all the latest theories, all the latest gods. He's challenging them. So you, at whatever level you're at, what is the meaning you get from it? Now, I have to give a lecture. I'm being paid for that, and you're the clients, and I'm the seller. I have to give a lecture. So the lecture I'm giving is going to be trying to put it into this whole epoch, this whole framework, the whole artistic and intellectual climate. So first of all, I told you about realism and anti-realism. So this is a form of anti-realism. We will help communicate what is true about life, what social life and all life is through, as artists of any sort, of waking up the creative aspect of the human. But we're also in the world of Heidegger, intellectually in Europe. Heidegger is the great philosopher in the 20th century, and a lot of people who then became existentialists claim him. He didn't like that particularly because he was doing something else, but he formulated the phrase, the human being is thrown into the world. He did many things, Heidegger, but one of the phrases that you can see being represented here is the human being is thrown into the world. Okay? You wake up one day, intellectually, maturely, having experience, and you start to think about life. Okay? For such a person, Heidegger is saying a good way of looking into the meaning of your life is first and foremost not to take anything for granted. No preconceived ideas. Right? So the devil becomes preconceived ideas in some of the philosophers that follow Heidegger. Put all your preconceived ideas about things on the side. You won't lose them, they're still there, but try to see whether you can't discover something else, something that isn't just what you have been led to think is everything. You're just thrown into the world. You discover, well, here I am. Where am I on a, who knows where? Who knows where this is, the setting, you see? And then I ask the question, who am I? Know thyself. Apollo had taught. Okay. Well, who am I? Okay. You're told things about yourself. You're in this particular family, you're in this particular society, you're in this particular religion, or in this particular ideology, or whatsoever. You're told many things about yourself. You learn many things about yourself through biology and psychology and astrophysics and all the sciences you study. Okay, so you're getting lots of data for who you are, but who you are fully is basically, I'm now down on 7b. You're thrown into the world, and there's no serious reason for you to believe there's a God, the way God has been presented to you, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Mahabba, or even the rationalistic God of Plato and the philosophers, or the mystical God of mysticism. There's no good reason for you as a human being to actually think that this is sure, that this is certain. You must put all this aside for a while if you want to really look into yourself. You won't lose it. It's still there. You can bring it back anytime you want to. But try to divest yourself as much as possible of anything you can doubt, if you think back to Descartes. But here, of everything you think you're sure of. And now make the adventure. Take the journey, the human journey, the intellectual and spiritual journey from zero. Do this sort of exercise, if you like, because it'll give you lots of fruit. So there's society. Is society your only hope the Athenian polis, where you cannot be a human outside of a democratic kind of polis, and therefore you should want to give your life to it, like Oedipus did, or like the philosopher King does in Plato. All right, the polis is what gives you meaning in life, and therefore you should be devoted to it, the way an Oedipus was, or the way a philosopher King is supposed to be. Go back down into the cave. See, if you hadn't had any of this, that's not my fault. But anyway, this is sort of there's a continuum in thought and in human life. So God, society. Society is going to give me meaning. Humanistic values, égalité, fraternité, liberté, democracy, the New World Order, wonderful slogans, humanism, humanisms of all sorts, telling you this, follow me, and this is where you'll find true value. He says, what serious reason do you have to really take these as your gods, you say, because you're all seeking to find gods, meaning things that you can seriously follow and not then want to hammer away, but something that you want to keep. So there's no, in the beginning, solitude. In the Christian religion, in the beginning, in the Bible, God. And because God is the only existence, therefore you can take courage from that. You can take comfort from that what finally is over all of this is a God whom you then think is merciful and compassionate and loving and like a good parent taking care of you. All right? So basically then, in the beginning, not God, but in the beginning, solitude. And solitude here is connected with alienation. There's nothing that seriously belongs to you do you have. You've been cut off from it for one reason or another. You've been separated from God, if you believe in God. That's the alienation in monotheism. Alienation, however, in Marxism, of course, was the alienation of the labor, the produce of the laborer from the laborer. And so there's that kind of alienation. Here it's spiritual, human, radical alienation. You're separated from everything. The world is absurd. Nobody hears you. No other human being. Nobody understands another human. You barely understand yourself. You're alone. Not lonely, because lonely you can go find a friend. But solitude is a metaphysical word. It's a metaphysical concept. You are totally alone. That's the first thing that your mind should lead you to, according to him, you see. You see what he's telling you, and insofar as you see it, you gain from it. You can also disagree with it or take it in part, but it's a very important approach that influenced people in the 20th century. So you cannot look for meaning through fellowship, through empathy, through communication. And he shows this in the way the characters are alone. Each one is alone. Language does not work anymore. The impotence of language. So when you read the play, you will see that they use language, but they don't communicate anything to one another. No one understands anybody in the play. All right? So this is the symbolic use of language there. Language, which is supposed to be our main way of communicating things and developing philosophy and arguments and books and just communicating with each other about ourselves. His use of language is highly symbolic. They speak, but they don't speak to each other. All right? There's no communication, and the language is broken down, the impotence of language. The essence of life, therefore, your first conclusion, because this is ongoing, is anguish, angst. And there's no English word that really translates angst. Anguish has in it this feeling of totally being alienated from everything, this fully alone and threatened. See, only anguish if there's something threatening you. If any of you ever read Kafka and others who presented this kind of thing, that basically this is what anguish is. Not just simply anxiety, that's the closest word, but here it's a metaphysical anxiety. It's a sort of structural, you're created that way, you're born that way. Evolution has made you like this, Freud would tell you, all right? Basically, and for him now, for this kind of thinking, it's primarily focused around death. Humans are always looking for an answer to death and to give a meaning to death. And if you find no meaning to death, then this becomes horrible. All right? If there's a meaning to death in some way, all right, then, okay, death, You can accept it as something natural that you should sort of get used to and adjust to and all of this. But humans, that's not enough for you to just be told, well, you're going to die anyway, and you have to be a mature human and take it and all this. Okay, that's nice preaching. But the human does not, death is the worst enemy. So, finally, so you try to find meaning. Philosophers and ideologies and everything else try to give you some meaning to this mortality. If you find no meaning, and you think your fate is a meaningless death, you see, you connect this to Gilgamesh, you connect this to Homer, you can connect it to many of the things that you should take from CVSP before you leave university. But, this is not something absolutely new. It's kind of something now being lived and expounded on with more, after having more historical thought about all of this, etc. Mortality. So, these are the things you can sort of these are building steps for understanding yourself. Know thyself. Okay? Solitude. Impotence of language, no communication, in other words, meaningless mortality. Monotony. Monotony is what you're experiencing now because you're bored to death with my lecture. But monotony here again is a spiritual thing, a metaphysical. I hate to use these words because they mean so many different things to people, but something that goes right to the core of your understanding of life. There is no real meaning there, okay? So monotony means whatever you're doing has the same value. Whatever you're doing is just simply, compensating for the fact you can't have fulfillment of your instinctive desires. So back to Freud there. It's really that you're not really. There's no value in things. You just do things for the moment. Things that will relieve your anxiety. Things that will give you more instinctive satisfaction. Whatever, and therefore. If I had more time, I'd be reading from them, but I hope you find them when you read them. At one point, after they've been doing everything like this and it's going nowhere, there's no action, it's all activity, and it's great fun. It's a lovely play when it's done properly. But the meaning of it, the message of it, is captured in one line. We always do something, ADD, that's Vladimir, to give us the impression we exist. So whatever you're doing, something which you think is, so wonderful and so noble and so great, or you're doing something stupid like, he can't pee properly, has a problem with his prostate, or whatever you're doing, or Bibles and boots, Socrates and a pig, each thing, depending on how much it gives you, sort of to relieve your angst, your anxiety, that's the only value that's there. So beyond any sort of good and evil that you're used to, the only good is that which relieves your angst and that gives you some impression that you have some meaning in life, that we exist, because existence in existential thinking is the heart of our humanity. Before we talk about reason, before we about talking anything else, existence itself is the richest fact about ourselves. And everything else we do is exploring this existence. All right? So what he's saying now, everything we do is just to give us the impression we exist. And this is going to be a major difference between existentialisms, many, and absurdity. Absurd and existentialistic thinking all start with the absurdity of life, the recognition that we are thrown into the world, that there's nothing easy and comfortable for us we don't really communicate very well. There's no clear meaning of why things are more valuable than the other. The threat of nothingness. At any moment you could be, you stop existing. Annihilation. That's what he thinks. That's what this kind of thinking leads to. The threat of nothingness. All of these are ingredients in what comes to be called an understanding of human life, the meaning of human life, as absurdity. Existential thinking differs with absurd thinking, and that you'll be coming into this with some of the people that we're coming into now. But what is existential thinking, existentialism? The human response. How do we respond to this? You see, once we see this, once we're faced with this challenge, life has no clear meaning. And no matter whatever we try, we think is going to give us meaning, it fails us, the failure of all the gods we pursue. All right, then the rational conclusion should be that life is absurd. There's no meaning to it. Now, how do you respond to this? And that's a major point here. Beckett's response, waiting. That's the meaning of waiting for Godot. Godot comes to mean anything that you think will give you meaning. All right? And you cannot rationally think it'll never come. And you shouldn't rationally believe it has come. All right? So you can neither despair nor you can presume. All right? He loved this polarity between the thief who supposedly is saved because he says, he tells the other thief who supposedly is condemned, or there's nothing, these value judgments are not there. But, in the Christian picture of Christ, the three crosses, Christ is in the middle. One of them tells him, if you're really the Christ, come down off the cross and show. The other one says, hey, look, this guy didn't do anything. We deserve to be on the cross. He's innocent. And so Christ tells him, today you will be with me in paradise. Beckett says he loves this because of not its religious meaning, but its human meaning, that we're always in between the poles of despair and presumption. And he believes what he's telling us is avoid both mistakes. Don't presume you know everything that's going to give you happiness and fulfillment in life. And don't despair that you'll never find it. Wait. Wait. It could come. So life is about waiting for the Godot, whatever that is, which will give meaning to life. So in the absurdity, waiting is the only thing we can really do as action, as leading anywhere, because it could lead to something. So basically, everything you do is not action, it's just activity. So if you read the play, and you watch it, they do things. They do a lot of things, lots of activity, lots of interesting activity, lots of give and take, lots of all this. It's great fun when you watch it doing properly. All right? It's a comedy at one level, and in the meaning of it, it's fun, but it's a tragicomedy in terms of the meaning of it, that through, what appears to be possible and happy and optimistic and all this, there's the tragic side. So you cannot separate the two, and therefore what do you get? You get equilibrium, you get paralysis. Waiting is a form of paralysis, but of active paralysis. All right? Don't despair. Don't presume. Keep going, because who knows? That's the rational thing to conclude from the absurd view of life. Wait, something might happen. We're not telling you nothing could happen. We're just telling you that what's been offered us on the menu now isn't really giving us any serious hope. But don't despair, because hope could come. So existentialists think that this is precisely the existentialists' motivation for meaning in life. You are challenged by not being given something easy and something simple and something you can just, buy into and become a herd and a slave, and in the Nietzschean terms. You're being challenged now to do what Nietzsche was doing, trying to wake people up to discover life in whatever it is they want to follow. All right? And to take away to see the death in all the great gods of the systems that are being presented. And I think for him, he was trying to save many of them by putting them back on the master path, if they can recognize the slave way they were living these isms. But that's up to your interpretation of Nietzsche. But certainly it's possible to see that in Nietzsche. So people like Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, Malraux, Sartre, Camus, all of these people, so pre this period and after this period, in one way or another, you can see similarities in their approach. Okay? That life has a very absurdist meaning, but only as one aspect, because none of them could be called absurdists. But like the existentialists, they all saw the possibility that life had no serious meaning, that it was absurd, that it was tragic, that it was whatever. All the things that if you had looked at all of the things that had come before now, that would make better sense to you. The point is that in all of these philosophies, and certainly in modern existentialism, whether it's theistic or atheistic, the heart is commitment, authenticity, choice, responsibility, freedom. And for Sartre, it becomes absolute freedom. The rebel creator. This is the model for existentialist human being. Be active. Be challenged by things like, is life absurd? Be challenged when somebody challenges whatever you think, at whatever level in the historical process you think now you know the truth. All right? Be challenged that maybe it's not the truth. Maybe it's just a partial truth that's making you worship it as a god. And it's become an idol. It's become an ism. Look into it and find the life that's there and bring that out if there's life. And if there's no life, then let it die, a peaceful death. So basically, these people all stressed in one way or another, commitment, authenticity, choice, responsibility, absolute freedom. You see, they were fighting the scientific determinism of the day, which is still very powerful and victorious in your own world today at the university, all right? For them, this was the devil. We are just like any other thing in this universe. We are free. That's the heart of the human. And that's our burden, and that's what we don't want. So we want to sell our freedoms. So anybody who will give us, money and food, all right, take us wherever you want to. Nazism, Stalinist communism, all right, just any ism that will take you somewhere, it becomes your, giving away your freedom. Dostoevsky put this into the wonderful little passage in Brothers Karamazov, which we used to use sometimes in the past in CS, the Grand Inquisitor, where the main point there is Christ comes back to earth, and the cardinal, the religious authority, arrests him, and then tells him, and Christ never says anything, but obviously in that passage Dostoevsky is presenting him. He says, you thought, the Inquisitor tells him, you came to give people freedom. They don't want freedom. You don't know what people want. You are oppressing the human race. The human race wants simply, what will give them comfort and bread and butter and food and money and the capitalistic dream. So Dostoevsky, all these people, Camus, because he was also atheistic, not all of them were atheistic, believes we're absolutely free. This is back to Nietzsche's, we have murdered God, but do you know what that means? That means we have to become gods. Say that, when you take that out of Nietzsche, you've lost his meaning, his particular brand of atheism. So this is, for these people, that's who you are as a human being, not just the result of your environment and your genes, and now cognitive science and evolutionary science and astrophysics science can tell you all the answers of the world, and Hawking can write the grand design, and you can read it and become a comfortable, slave and herd follower of a Hawking. I'm just throwing this out as examples of this is ongoing that these great people teach us to look for in every sense. So for Beckett, the waiting is all paralysis, but not a high-level equilibrium, but a paralysis where I don't have enough information to really act, so the only rational thing is to wait. Wait, maybe something will happen. Go on doing what we're doing, but don't ever really think you're doing anything better or worse, or you're helping mankind, or you're not. Forget all this. You don't have enough clarity to really say that. Just say, I'm doing what I'm doing to give myself the impression that I exist. I'm trying to give myself the only meaning that's left for me as an absurdist, and that is I will wait. I won't just cop out and commit suicide, and I won't really hang on to any of the gods that are being offered to me until I am convinced. And maybe I will be convinced. That's the paralysis, the positive paralysis of the complete agnostic, because most agnostics are not really agnostic. They really, they call themselves agnostics, but they've taken a position on, the divine. So basically, it's metaphysical, ontological. It's a philosophical view, absurdity, not just something transitional, something that you can, easily do with. For the existentialist, you should be doing something about it. You should create meaning. You should, give meaning back to the human race. You have to be active. That's the difference between existentialism and absurdity. So basically, this is the heart of what he's doing throughout the world. So Godot can become for you anything, the expectation of which keeps you living. And living is waiting. Anything that keeps you living, if you really want to understand it according to this analysis, is you're following some Godot, all right? And so for those of you who do want to stay, just one more minute, it's hope, but it's minimal hope. It's not that strong hope where you're convinced the future has something for you, but it's minimal hope, sufficient to keep you going so that you're not just dead. And the last item there, of wars and carrots, of conferences and kings, a Beckettian analysis of current events for many, many years now, is that we're always being offered something new, the new world order, the new Middle East, this or that or this or that, They're like carrots for my favorite animal, the donkey. I once played a donkey, and one of my friends came up and told me, this is the best part as an actor that you have ever played. All right, so, the donkey, okay, well, think of the donkey with a carrot on the stick, all right? There's a stick and there's a carrot.